We are overdue for our continuation of the X-Men film franchise, and that brings us to X-Men First Class. Now, normally I'm not big on prequels. They've got a lot of inherent issues. One of them being, we know where these characters are going to end up later, so it takes a lot of the stakes out. Despite my reservations, this actually turned out really well and was a really important step for the franchise in a lot of ways. The first being the omission of Wolverine. It was really important that there finally be a film that establishes X-Men as a franchise does not begin and end with Wolverine, because he had been the focus of every single film. Let's get the focus back on Professor X and Magneto. As I pointed out when I talked about the first X-Men film, there are a lot more continuity issues with this than I had initially thought when watching it. The continuity errors are not the fault of this film, and actually I gotta say they ultimately made the right call to accept certain continuity errors for the sake of telling a better story. Things like where Professor Xavier said that he met Magneto as a teenager, and obviously we're seeing them meet for the first time in their 30s. So there's those sorts of decisions being made. Set continuity errors aside, this is a really tight film, and there's not too much to complain about here. They make really good use of the period setting, that sort of James Bond era spy feel that you kind of get to it. That's a really good thing to pull from it, and they avoid all the 60s cliches of hippies and counterculture and all that other junk that's just been done to death. Casting, really nicely done, because given that they already had iconic performances given by Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, you need to get really good actors who are good enough to pick pieces that will evoke what the other actors have done so that you can see the connection, but are also confident enough in themselves to do their own thing, so it's not an impression at any point. They can be younger, they can be brasher, they can have things different about the characters, because we know they're gonna go through a lot of personal changes in a journey. I think it was also a good call not to have too many recurring characters, ones we'd already seen. Basically all we've got Professor X and Magneto, we've got Mystique. That's pretty much it as far as direct characters that we've seen before. Oh, no, there is one more, and that's Beast. And choosing to have Hank McCoy front and center, actually a pretty good call, especially considering we're not going to see him go through a physical transformation until a little after the halfway mark. So he was a good call to bring back as well. Pretty much everybody else, though, is all fresh blood, which is a really good idea. By filling out the rest of the X-Men team with characters we have not seen before, Havoc, Angel, Darwin, Banshee, this gives us the opportunity to throw in characters where you don't know if they're going to make it, because we haven't seen them later on. They could very well die. Unfortunately, most of these filler characters feel like just that. They feel like filler characters. I'm not sure there was much that could be done about that, though, because the focus really needs to be so strongly on Professor X and Magneto that they were always just going to be side characters. The action, there's a decent amount of action in this film, but it doesn't feel like an action film. It feels much more intellectual, which is a bit more in line with X2. So it's nice to be getting that feeling back as well. Matthew Vaughn, who came on to direct this, it almost feels like, in a way, he's kind of apologizing for X-Men The Last Stand. He's saying, look, because I left that film, I couldn't guide it into something better. You got stuck with what you had. So here, let me apologize and give you what I hoped I could have given you if I'd done The Last Stand. Effects are all very good, and it's much more careful use of special effects than we saw in X-Men Origins Wolverine or in X-Men The Last Stand. It's just a return to form for the franchise. I still personally like X2 a little bit better, but I think this does give it a run for its money, and anyone who says that First Class is their favorite in the series, I would not begrudge them that. And now we're going to be getting our sequel basically to both this and X-Men The Last Stand in the form of Days of Future Past. It's going to be really interesting to see how they pull this off. So until next time, this council is adjourned.